Good afternoon, everyone. Just to introduce myself, I'm Clara Shepherd. I'm Member Engagement Manager at Lincoln's Inn. Thank you to everyone for joining us here today, and also to those joining remotely via Zoom for the Innsight session. It's really great to see so many of you. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. This event will run in two halves. My presentation about the Inn should last around 45 minutes, and then there'll be a short break, and then one of our Barrister members will be joining us. She will speak for about 30 minutes, and then there will be an opportunity to ask questions during the Q&A at the end. So bear that in mind and get some good questions. We aren't expecting any fire alarms today. So if the alarm does sound, please follow the green signs at the top there and come in, leave via the route that you came this afternoon. And members of staff will be around to direct you as well. So for the Q&A at the end, if you are joining us remotely, please use the Q&A tab on Zoom. And if you are joining us in person, there will be a microphone which we will go around, and please raise your hand. So now on to the presentation. So welcome to Lincoln's Inn. Got some nice pictures up there of the inn. I don't know if you've had the chance to have a wander around, but please do afterwards if you'd like to. So there are 4 inns of court: Gray's Inn, Lincoln's Inn, Middle Temple, and Inner Temple. And we all basically do the same sorts of things. We're professional associations for barristers and judges. We're the only organisations that have the power to call those who are qualified to the bar. And we also play a fundamental role in terms of preparing students for calls through our educational activities. And after call, we also support members as they progress through their careers. We also have supervisory and disciplinary functions, and as you may have seen as you came in today, we also have a library, dining facilities, gardens, accommodation, and a chapel for members to use as well. We are landlords to chambers, private tenants. We're also a venue for weddings, films, and television programs. You might have seen us on Netflix, etc. So I've just added some pictures of all of our various different venues within the inn. That's the lecture theatre, which you are now, the Great Hall. That's our beautiful library, and I would recommend having a look if you get the chance today. And the chapel as well. Great Hall is where we call our student barristers to the bar. So I'm just going to summarise the general route to the bar, which some of you may or may not be aware. Firstly, the qualifying law degree, which I'm sure a lot of you are undertaking at the moment. Or there is also the graduate diploma in law route as well. So making arrangements for the bar course. So this is something I would urge you to consider. Start having a think about which inn of court you'd like to become a member of about a year before you start your bar course. The deadline for scholarships is quite early. So if you are intending on starting your bar course next September, for example, you should be applying for a scholarship at this point. Scholarship applications are open and they will be closing on the first Friday of November of this year. So you can only apply for one inn for a scholarship, and bear that in mind. And I'd really recommend going and have a look at the other inns as well. And in terms of joining an inn of court, you must join basically 12 weeks before you start your bar course, 3 months, and secure your place on the course at a provider. You can also only apply to one inn. So in terms of the bar course, you also have to do some training at the inn as well. And that training we tend to call qualifying sessions, and you must complete 10 at your inn in order to be called. And then the final stage is the call to the bar ceremony, which I mentioned. It takes place in our Great Hall. It's essentially like a graduation ceremony that you have at university, and only your inn can do this. And after call, you must also complete 12 months in chambers. You might know it as pupillage, or at another approved training organisation. So where can you study the bar course? You might have already done some research into this. There are lots of different locations. They're not all based in London. I believe there is a list on the Bar Standards Board website, and we'd be happy to provide that as well. But here are some examples of universities that provide the bar course, or what we call bar course providers. And you must basically apply directly to that institution, not through the Inn. So just to give a summary of the bar course, that it's basically a 3-step pathway: academic degree, followed by the vocational part, which is the bar course, followed by pupillage or a work-based component. So I'm sure you'll be familiar about this one as well. And we've given some examples of how much the bar course costs on the two. There is also a 4-step pathway, which is quite new. Last couple of years, providers have started to introduce this, which basically splits the bar course into part 1 and part 2. But all of them finish with the pupillage or work-based component in order to succeed at the bar. So another new route that has been introduced is the sort of integration of a degree and the bar course as well. I know that a couple of those providers that you will have seen on the presentation are starting to provide that as well. And there are talks of an apprenticeship pathway too in the future, which is yet to be confirmed. So a little reminder about scholarships. So scholarships and prizes. The deadline for bar course scholarships, if you are intending to start your bar course next year, is the first Friday in November this year. And if you're thinking about GDL scholarships, which is also something that Inns offer, that will be the first Friday in May. So all of our scholarships are awarded on merit, and the value of each award is calculated on a means test based on applicants' financial means. And you can apply for a scholarship before you join an Inn. But once you are awarded that scholarship, you would be expected to be admitted to that in order to receive funds. That's our budget for the year. We offer around 1.5 million in bar course scholarships each year, and about 100 scholarships in total. The top award is the Lord Mansfield Scholarship. I think there's about 10 of those. And we also have a budget for GDL scholarships too, if that's something you're bearing in mind. And the budget is on there, but we award around 30 each year for those, and those are also means tested. There are additional benefits to being a scholar of the Inn: free admission, for example, and reduced qualifying session rates. So qualifying sessions are basically those events that I mentioned that the Inn provides. And also free call to the bar, which is that graduation ceremony after your bar course. As part of our scholarships and awards, we also offer 14 on-site rooms for student scholars. It's only for London-based students for obvious reasons. And what you would do is register your interest when you're applying for a scholarship. And rent is basically taken directly out of that scholarship fund. So what are we looking for? In terms of the application and interview process, intellect, motivation, personal characteristics, and communication. All things that basically the panelists on an interview panel are looking for from scholars. If you are interested in applying for a scholarship, we have a lot of information on our website, the various FAQs, and a scholarships coordinator who would be happy to help if you do have any questions. I'd recommend going on all of the Inn's websites, looking at their scholarships and bearing them in mind, because I know that it's quite a big financial undertaking doing the bar course. So definitely something to consider. So some things just to bear in mind: you can only apply to one Inn of Court for a scholarship. So please do bear that in mind. We swap lists, so we will know if you've applied to more than one. As I've said before, you don't need to be a member of an Inn to apply, so you can make a scholarship application, but you will need to join that Inn should you receive your scholarship money. And you will need to supply at least 2 references with your application form for a scholarship at the Inn. Part-time students, if that's something you're considering, you can apply either in your first year or your second year, but you can only receive 1 scholarship. And international students are eligible, but you will need to demonstrate that you intend to practice at the Bar of England and Wales. And just to note, GDL scholars are not necessarily guaranteed a bar course scholarship at Lincoln's Inn. That is something that differs us from other inns of court. So qualifying sessions. These are those events that I mentioned that student barristers are required to undertake during their bar course year or 2 years, depending on if it's part-time. You need to complete 10, 1 from each of the following categories. Different categories there. We've got ethics, standards and values, advocacy skills, legal knowledge, equality, diversity and inclusion, and management of pupillage, career development and well-being. And basically, we offer a wide range of events, an annual programme of events which fit into those categories. And it could range from advocacy workshops, residential weekends, lectures, dinners, debate dinners, lots of different events that we offer during the year, ethics workshops, etc. That's an example of, I think, a talk in our Great Hall, and also one of the venues that we have our residential weekends. So we also offer additional support. So pupillage grants, we have a budget of £65,000, and that is given to assist our pupil members during their pupillage year, particularly if they are doing legally aided work. We also have other support, such as the European and international scholarships, definitely something to bear in mind. Various different European scholarships we have people go off to European courts, and really good for pupillage applications, things like that, and a great experience. So they always come back with, plenty of experience and plenty to talk about. And we also have a number of prizes. So we have a Buchanan Award, which is basically a cash prize to the students who achieve the highest percentile on the bar course. Student of the Year Award, so a wig and gown, which, as I'm sure you know, are very expensive, to the top scoring student on the bar course. And we also have a range of competitions. So it might be debating competitions, mooting competitions, legal essays, that kind of thing during the year, and other opportunities available to students. So lots of networking with our members. That's a sort of idea of the different competitions that we have: a Law Journal Prize, Debating Shield, an inter-provider mooting competition. So that's basically bar course providers all submit a team, and we have a sort of a competition to select for the best team for that, and that takes place at the Inn. The Clara Shield is a public speaking competition where basically you are defending a fictional character, which is quite a fun one. And the Gluckstein is an advocacy competition. We also have a mentoring scheme for students and marshalling. So mentoring is when you'd be paired up with a barrister member, subject to geography, area of law, etc. And normally they would help you with things like your pupillage application and support you during that year that you're doing the bar course. Marshalling scheme, I'm sure most of you are aware, but that's basically going and sitting with a judge for 1 to 3 days and discussing the case that they're doing. And we also provide European court visits. So I think that is one that we did a couple of years ago to the European Court of Human Rights. We also go to The Hague and Strasbourg. So we also have plenty of opportunities for non-members. So I'm assuming the most of you in this room aren't yet members of an Inn. And we do have a number of outreach opportunities, events and initiatives that I'd really recommend you taking advantage of, not just at Lincoln's Inn, but at all 4 Inns. So just highlights the Newbeger Prize. That's a prize for academically exceptional students studying at non-Russell Group universities. Information about that is all on our website underneath the Becoming a Barrister section. But if you do have any questions about that one, let me know at the end and I'm happy to help. We also have a mini pupillage grant scheme. So that's basically providing financial support for those who need to want to undertake mini pupillages, but wouldn't necessarily be able to do so because of financial reasons. So Gray's Inn also offer plenty of opportunities. I'd recommend going on all of the Inn's websites and taking advantage of those. So they have university advocacy days, and Inner have a pass scheme, which basically I think they provide mini pupillages and things like that, and possibly mentoring as well. And Middle Temple have access to the Bar Award, which is a mini pupillage and marshalling scheme. One thing I would say is that it's worthwhile sort of taking these opportunities while you're not a member of the Inn, because often it's good for you to basically go and undertake these opportunities rather than committing yourself too early to one Inn, because some of them are restricted to non-members, or they basically will say, if you're a member of another Inn, you're not eligible for this scheme. So I would recommend taking part in these opportunities before you sort of go through the admissions phase. So some advice for you all. Gain experience. It sounds obvious, but things like mini pupillages, marshalling, shadowing barristers, networking opportunities, events like this, take full advantage of them, because now is the time to do it. The bar course year is extremely busy. It's an intense year or 2 years, and often it's good to start early in terms of gaining your experience. My tip for this would also be to write down people you've met, talks that you've observed. Make sure that you can remember, because if you were in a scholarship or a pupillage interview, they will ask you about that, and you want to be able to remember who you were shadowing or which chambers, etc. Also utilising societies at universities. So I'm sure a lot of you already do that already, but there are loads of societies open both to law and non-law students, bar societies, law societies, who offer a range of events and opportunities to network. And they often will provide that avenue to access barristers, judges, etc., particularly for things like mooting, debating, competitions, public speaking, etc., which are all good stuff for pupillage applications. And they also, a lot of them do have links of chambers in the area, the Inns of Court, etc. In particular, we offer sponsorship to student law societies twice a year. So if you are on a committee for one of those, I would recommend exploring that. You can find out more on our website under the Becoming a Barrister section. I think there's a tab called Funding. So we basically often sponsor barrister-related events and initiatives that these societies are offering. And keeping up to date with legal matters sounds obvious, but books that we'd recommend, Secret Barrister, In Black and White, brilliant books, and websites such as Legal Cheek, the Inns of Court websites, things like that. Often barristers at talks like this will say, keep up to date with the news, because often it's good to have that kind of day-to-day insight of what's happening in the world and any changes within the law. And checking out lots of other organisations. So it's not just the Inns that offer opportunities to prospective members. There are specialist bar associations that you might be familiar with. They offer mentorship programs, careers advice, events, and other opportunities. I'd really recommend having a look at those. We do have a list that I can share with anyone who's interested. They all have their own websites. And if you do have a particular area of law in mind, there is often a specialist bar association dedicated to them. For example, Criminal Bar Association will have seen in the news. So yes, I'd recommend having a look there as well, because there are plenty of opportunities out there should you wish to utilise them. And social media. So all of the inns are on social media. Lots of barristers are as well, chambers, etc. I'm sure you're all sort of familiar with this, but often keeping up to date with current affairs and things that are happening within the profession, using social media is a good way of being able to do that. So just a little bit about membership. We hope that you join Lincoln's Inn, but all of the inns, we do the same thing, and we hope that you would become active members within inn life and that you get as involved as possible. Membership is for life. You pay the one-off fee at the beginning, and then at that point you are a member for life. We do have lots of benefits of being a member of Lincoln's Inn, and the other inns do as well. Things like members' lunch. So we serve lunch Monday to Friday, lunchtimes in the Great Hall. Student members are very welcome to attend, and smart casual is generally the dress code for that. We also have an MCR restaurant and bar, which you may have passed on your way in. It's basically a place where a lot of our members come to network. We often, when we hold events, people will often go there and socialize afterwards. You can bring clients there, you can bring friends there. It's a really lovely atmosphere, so I'd really recommend going should you become a member of us. Normal opening hours are 10:30 till 10:30 Monday to Friday, and we're not open on weekends. And walk-ins are welcome, but reservations are advised, I've been told by the team. So the library, so that's a key highlight in my opinion. It is a very beautiful place. I'd really recommend going along and having a look. Normal opening hours, I believe, are 9 till 7 at the moment, Monday to Friday, and we take it in turns to open on Saturdays with the other inns on a kind of alternating basis too. So wellbeing at the bar, both the inns and the Bar Council as well provide a lot of support to barristers, students, chambers personnel in terms of staying well through various different schemes, because we appreciate that when you're a self-employed person, you don't get the same benefits as you would in an organisation. They offer counselling services, things like that. They have a dedicated website for mental health and wellbeing at the bar, and it's worth checking out because we appreciate that it's quite a busy and some often traumatic role. So they do provide a lot of support, which is worth exploring. And we've put the link up to the website there. So that's pretty much my presentation. I finished a little bit early, so I don't know if anyone had any initial questions now before we break and we hear from Madeleine, who is our barrister coming along today. I'm happy to take any. Yeah. It's all basically means tested separately by an independent panel from the one that you are interviewed by in terms of the scholarship. Yeah. Basically, we say 12 weeks before you start your bar course, so you can join any point up until that point. I wouldn't say there's sort of a recommended time, if that makes sense, as long as you meet the deadline beforehand. I would say actually don't join too early, to be honest, because you want to take as much of an opportunity to see the other inns and explore their various opportunities as well. Thank you.
Not expecting that. Thank you for that. That was really great. On the applications for scholarships, I think the slide said at least 2 references. So are we kind of expected to do more? Is 2 the amount we should?
I don't know why it says that actually. I think it is just 2 references. If you do have any scholarships queries for that one, I'd recommend getting in touch with our scholarships coordinator, but I think it is 2, so I don't think they would expect more than 2. Okay. Oh, another one. Yeah, if you just.
So there was a section in the bar course where I looked at for the pupillage, and you offer also the scholarships for pupillage, and there's a 12 months and 3 months pupillage. So what's on that? Please guide.
In terms of the
Pupillage.
pupillage grants?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they generally are for pupils who aren't earning as much. So pupils who are doing legally aided work, and they basically top up their pupillage awards. So generally pupillages are funded by the chambers that you're undertaking it with, or the organisation. And yeah, it's to basically top up for those, tends to be criminal and family work, a lot of sort of legally aided work, that we sort of assist them and top up their grant, if that makes sense. So it's more of a grant than a scholarship, if that makes sense.
Hi. Okay, so to be eligible for the bar course, do we have to give the BCAT exam before it?
Oh, I'm not sure. I think they are still, they don't. Okay. I think they changed that. Yeah.
And is it mandatory to do the pupillage after the bar course?
Yes, basically to practice as a barrister, you will
In
need
England?
yeah, in
So
England
if
and
we
Wales.
go back to our country, it's not mandatory.
It depends on the country that you would end up in terms of their own sort of rules on practicing, but you would need to, if you want to practice at the Bar of England and Wales, you would need to undertake pupillage, and at that point you would be a qualified barrister. Basically.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. Earlier you mentioned that you could put us in contact with other organizations. How do we give you our details in order to get that information from you?
Yeah, so we have a dedicated email account called outreach@lincolnsinn.org.uk, and depending on who, whether you signed up personally or through a society today, we will send a follow-up email, and that will be from our outreach account. If you just reply to that, we've got a list of specialist bar associations that you can have a look and take advantage of. We've had a couple from online, so if you do have any more, then absolutely we'll get to them at the end after Madeleine has spoken, but I might have a look and see if there are any from people on Zoom.
Am I okay to ask my question?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to ask if there are any sort of material differences between the inns that you should consider when making the decision between which inn to apply for?
Not really. I think the key thing is that we all do the same thing. We have slightly different offerings with regard to non-compulsory things. So I don't know, things like the PASS scheme and our Newberger Prize, things like that. We often have different kinds of outreach opportunity schemes. We slightly differ in terms of things that are the non-compulsory training element of things. So support for members, things like that. But generally speaking, we do the same. So we're not sort of advocating that you join us, because we all are the same sort of organization. We often will say, please go and check out the other inns. It's often good. We all do student tours. We all sort of do events like this. So it's good to go along and just get a feel for which you want to join. But generally speaking, we all do the same things. So there's nothing that I'd say, there's no sort of right end to join.
Sorry, could you please clarify whether a student coming from a PGDL course is less likely to get a scholarship? I'm not sure if I understood right the slide.
What do you mean, the bar course scholarships or GDL scholarships?
No,
yes,
for the bar scholarship coming from PGDLs.
Sure. So that part of the slide was basically explaining, so some inns of court, they guarantee GDL scholars bar course scholarships. We don't. We have separate sort of a separate scholarship process for each. So just because you got a GDL scholarship from the inn would not mean you're guaranteed a bar course one. Does that make sense? But you're not sort of, a lot of them do. It's just the other inns, I think maybe one or two of the other inns do guarantee that. So it's just something that I would say it is slightly different in terms of our scholarships offering, if that makes sense. I've had a couple of questions online, which I will have a look at. So someone's asked about opportunities for non-members. Can we apply to multiple things from different inns? So yeah, I would absolutely advocate going out, you know, taking part in applying for prizes, those sorts of things when you're not a member of an inn. Look at their eligibility criteria, because often it's a case of just having a look and seeing if you're eligible. For example, our Newberger Prize is open to non-Russell Group universities, so things like that. Often these opportunities, we will say if you're a member of another inn, then you wouldn't be eligible. So I just check out what in particular opportunity you're looking at and basically basing it on that and not applying for an inn too early in that respect. What else do we have in the chat? So I've got a question about scholarships. You said you're allowed to apply for one inn for a scholarship. Are we allowed to apply for all inns if we only apply for one scholarship? I'm not sure I understand the question, but basically you apply to one inn for a scholarship, and then the scholarship you are awarded is kind of chosen by the inn. There aren't like different scholarships to apply for, if that makes sense. So it's a sort of general application, and then the inn decides which scholarship you get, and you can only apply to one inn for that, if that makes sense. I'm not sure whether I sort of answered that correctly. In terms of, so we've had another question about means testing. Is it possible for an individual to be awarded a scholarship and then receive no monetary award post means test? I believe that everyone is still given a monetary award. It just depends on your financial background. So I don't think that you would necessarily be given no money at all, unless we have had people in the past who have opted for that because they just want the name of the scholarship rather than the actual monetary award. But I believe they sort of elect to do that. Any more from the floor? Yeah.
Hi, I may have missed this, but you mentioned that the court, like the inns take turns when it comes to library timings.
Yes.
Let's say we're registered with one inn, a member of one inn. Are we still allowed to visit other inns' libraries, or is it just like the one that we're registered with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yes, we often have people from other inns. It's the same with lunch, actually. So you could come along to a Lincoln's Inn lunch, even if you were a member of another inn. Likewise with the libraries, it's very much open to all members of all inns.
I would like to ask something about accommodation. So I would how the size, about the size of a accommodation, how many people would it be accommodated, and what kind of selections are you having?
In terms of the rooms, yeah, I'm not actually sure. I haven't seen them, but I believe there are around 14 rooms available. And what you would do is basically when you're filling out your scholarship application, there would be a sort of question on there about, would you like to be considered for in accommodation? And I think normally the people with the sort of top scholarships are considered first, and that's how, and then offered the rooms on that basis, dependent on who is interested and yeah, the level of interest there. So that's generally how it works. Was that what you meant? Yeah, great. Okay. One more.
Hi, I was just wondering if you're interested in specific chambers. would it be recommended to go to that Inn of Court to then do chambers, to then do pupillage at that chambers, or can you be in any Inn of Court and do pupillage at any other chambers?
Any. I think historically there were chambers who had particular links with a certain inn, especially if that chambers was, for example, at Lincoln's Inn. You'll see chambers around Lincoln's Inn, and there were traditions in the past, but that's absolutely not the case now. I don't think it's all kind of stereotypes more than anything else. So absolutely any inn, any chambers, we all do the same things. So I don't think there's any links like that nowadays.
Sorry, I'm back. So I have a final question. Like, I'm an international student over here. So for the scholarships, like a home student over here can show that he comes from a household which is, for example, less than £25,000. So what documents will I need to send or to prove you guys that I need the scholarship to support it?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure into how much detail, but basically once you reach that stage, in terms of the means testing, our scholarships coordinator would advise you on what you would need to provide in terms of the documents for the financial background. So I don't know specifically, and it often depends on various different things in terms of your own personal savings, things like that, that you would basically just be asked to sort of disclose your financial background. So it really depends on a case-by-case basis, but should you reach that point within the scholarships process, the team will sort of advise you on what you would be expected to declare. And we do have quite a lot of information generally about scholarships, and I'd really recommend going on our website and having a look if that's something you're hoping to do for the bar course, because it is an expensive course, so very much encourage you to look into that.
Hi, sorry. I just wanted to ask that I think the interview processes for the different inns differ. So like how does Lincoln's Inn interview process for the scholarship like differ from the other inns?
From what I know, I think there are some slight differences in terms of some inns do a paper sift. They don't interview everyone who applies, and other inns do. So at Lincoln's Inn, for example, we do a paper sift, and then we don't interview everyone. We just interview the people who are the sort of highest caliber. Whereas I think Inner and possibly another inn, they interview everyone who applies. So that's one key difference. In terms of the actual interview process itself, I think we vary in terms of maybe the length of the interview, how many people are on the panel, things like potentially the preparation in advance. So sometimes you will be expected to do a sort of advocacy problem. You'll be given material in advance to talk about maybe a legal issue or something. We vary in terms of the sort of format of the interview more than anything, how many people are on the panel, what you'll be expected to prepare. But generally speaking, all of the criteria in terms of the scholarships, they're quite similar. They're slightly different, but it's all on each of the INN's websites, so worth checking out. Generally, that's the same. We all means test, so again, it's pretty similar. So yeah, definitely check out, because it's some of the INN scholarships offering is slightly different, and certainly with the sort of guarantee of GDL and bar course scholarships, another thing we differ on too. Okay, so at this point, I suggest we have a quick break. We will reconvene at 4 p.m. and Madeleine Whelan, who's one of our barrister members, will talk to you for half an hour, and we'll have another Q&A. So if you've got any questions, we'll see you then. Right. I'm going to come in before. Yeah. I hate those scholarship questions. I know. Sorry, I don't. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've had a nice break. So on behalf of the Inn, I would like to introduce Madeleine Whelan. Madeleine's a barrister at the 36 Group and a member of Lincoln's Inn. She was called to the bar in 2017 and specialises in all areas of family law, and a particular emphasis on children and vulnerable adults. So I'm now going to hand you over to Maddie.
Hi, thank you, Clara. My name is Maddie. Clara's entirely right. I am a barrister at 36 Group, more specifically 36 Family Team. I'm a family barrister. I specialise in children law. So that's things like child protection, so kids being taken into care by the state, private children, parents battling about how much time they spend with each of their children, divorces, financial remedies upon divorce, court of protection, surrogacy, modern families, and international children, including international adoption. So basically anything to do with children, I do. I'll try not to speak too much about family, but I'm a bit of a family obsessive and I want you all to be family lawyers. So you'll have to pardon me if I get a bit distracted by how much I love family law, but we'll try and stay on track. Clara's asked me to sort of give you a bit of a background about me and why I went to the bar and how I got there. So I'm going to try and do that without sounding too much like a dick. So yes, I was called to the bar in 2017. I have now been practicing for 5 years. I fully qualified as a tenant at my old chambers in 2018 and moved chambers to 36 in April of this year. So I've been in 2 different chambers. I joined the Inn 2015. Would have been
right.
That must have been right. Yeah. 2017. Yeah. So I joined Lincoln's in 2015 when I was in my 3rd year of university. I went to Cambridge University. I did 4 years of law undergrad with a year abroad in the middle. I went to Madrid for a year. So technically I did law with European studies, but I don't speak a word of Spanish and have never used the European studies bit. So I did a law degree. I went straight from university to the bar course into pupillage. I'm going to circle back to whether or not I think that was a good idea, because the spoiler alert answer is no. And I have been practicing at the bar ever since. I've never practiced anything other than family. I trained in family. I am a family lawyer. In terms of where you are now, my understanding is most of you are still at law school or bars. Are any bar school students in? No. Okay. So you're all pre-bar school, wanting to know if you want to be barristers. Got it. So briefly, the application system has changed a little bit since I was at university. I applied for pupillage in my last year of university when I was doing my finals. I got a place in my pupillage starting the kind of 18 months after I'd finished. So I had time to do my bar course in the middle. I think that that was a good way of doing it. The bar course is extremely expensive and takes a lot of time, and only about 5 or 6 cities in the UK actually offer it. So if you're not from London or Nottingham or Manchester, you're going to struggle because you need to travel or live somewhere else. So unless you're super committed to being a barrister or you have a pupillage, I wouldn't recommend doing the bar course on its own. It's a matter for you, you're adults, but I think from my experience, it doesn't add a lot. There's not a lot of transferable skills in that course that mean that you can use it for something else. I wouldn't spend the money unless you have to, is basically the message. That being said, of course, Lincoln's is very generous and offers lots of money for you to cover those expenses. I was a recipient of a Lord Denning scholarship in my 2016 when I just graduated university, which paid for the vast majority of my bar course. I would not have done it were it not for that scholarship, because I couldn't have afforded to. I'm not sure anyone could. When I did it, it was like 25 grand, which is nonsense. So scholarships super important, not the be all and end all, and certainly not a judge of how well a barrister you're going to be or how good a barrister you're going to be, but it's a good indicator of how successful the career is likely to be in terms of getting to where you need to go, because I don't want you all spending loads and loads of money on something that you're not going to end up doing. It's a waste of time. So scholarships are your first thing to be looking out for. I think the window is open now, so do apply. It really is really helpful. You also really get a feel for the interview process. The pupillage application process is kind of horrible. It's just lots and lots and lots of interviews with lots and lots and lots of barristers who are a lot like me and therefore annoying. And so I think you need to get some practice in with any interviews you can do. Give it a shot, see how you get on. If you don't get it, you can reapply. And it's a really sensible way of kind of testing the waters in terms of what bar school is going to be and what pupillage is going to be and what being a barrister is going to be. So that's a sort of whistle stop about how I got to the bar. If we are back a little bit, I suppose the first question is, why did I choose to become a barrister? I originally wanted to be a criminal barrister, which I think everyone in this room probably did at some point. I wanted to wear the wig. And I realized pretty quickly that that was not a sustainable career path for lots of reasons. The first is financial. The second is I don't like juries. I think it's a bit of a circus, the criminal bar. Some people are very good at it. Those people are not me. So I realized that pretty quickly, that I wanted to talk to judges, not juries. And that was important for me, to be able to put my skills to a tribunal that was going to work for me. Juries don't work for me. So that was criminal law kind of out. And then I thought, well, I definitely want to work with people. I definitely want to talk. I definitely want to be the one doing the talking and doing the advocacy and doing the questioning. I don't want to be the one doing the client hand holding, because I'm not good at it. And I don't want to do loads of paperwork. So it seems like barrister was quite a good option for me. There are sort of two ways I think I divide the bar into, and that is kind of people and businesses in terms of who you want to represent. So you can either work with real people that you see on the street. That would be things like employment law, immigration law, family law, housing law, property law, trusts to an extent, wills to an extent, and family, and criminal. I think if we park criminal for a second, because we don't know what's actually going to happen with the criminal bar in the next few years. So keep your eye on that if you're interested in criminal law, because this government wants to get rid of it. So keep an eye on it. But if we park criminal for a second, we've got those kind of areas that deal directly with people and real lives and relationships and social dynamics and all that stuff. Or you've got tax, commercial, shipping, arbitration, company law, commercial law, contract law, tort law, all that stuff that's more businessy, more companies and that sort of thing. Now you can tell by the way I'm describing it that was not my bag. I don't even know what those words mean. So that was not for me. I wanted to work with real people. But I think the first choice I made after I'd sacked off criminal was, do I want to work with people still, or do I want to go and do the kind of businessy contractual side of it? For me, it was a very obvious choice that I didn't want to do the other side of it, but it's completely up to you. And actually the ones on that side of it make a lot more money than I do. So bear that in mind as well. And I think once that decision is made, you then need to think about what kind of a barrister, or if you can't make that decision, or there's two areas you want to do, or loads of areas you want to do, think about what your day is going to look like. So I have a very good friend who I went to university with. We went in the same year. We had the same qualifications. We came up at the same time. He's a member of Lincoln's, who would have been giving this talk if I couldn't have made it. And he's at Radcliffe Chambers, which do commercial chancery, which is trusts and, you know, contested trust deeds and so on for companies. And he is in court probably once a month, I would say. He sits in a room all day and thinks about things and gets paid lots and lots of money to write opinions about things that are very, very important and clever. No one pays me to do that, shock. So he's not the kind of barrister that you might think trots off to court every day with the suitcase and the wig and does all of that. That's not his job. He is much more an advisory consultant type role, which is what a lot of barristers are. People pay you to give an opinion on something, and that opinion is then used in court in some way or another, or used to keep your client out of court. So that's one area of being a barrister. If you are more kind of on the people side of it, so you're doing employment, family, crime, housing, immigration, you're going to be in court a lot, like a lot. When I started my pupillage, I was in court for about 7 hearings a week, which was unsustainable, but that's the legal aid bar. And that was a very different lifestyle and kind of time than my friend was having. I don't want to be overly glamorizing of that life. It's really, really exhausting, and it's physically very demanding, and it takes a lot of time. And if you're not someone who wants to kind of, you know, manage your own time in a way that is efficient, but also will be very tiring, it's maybe not the best choice. But there's lots of different barristers and lots of different ways of being a barrister. And if you want to be a barrister who sits in a room and thinks about things and asks people for their opinion, then there are ways of doing that. If you want to be a barrister who's in and out of court all the time, there are ways of doing that as well. Or you can have a nice happy medium and do property law, and you'll all be very happy. So I think if you're thinking about becoming a barrister, those are the things to think about in terms of what do you want your life to look like? What kind of people do you want to represent? What bits of society are you interested in changing? What bits of society are you not interested in changing? You might want to be a discrimination barrister. You might want to be a human rights barrister. I'm sure you all want to be human rights barristers. It's all very sexy when you think, yeah. You might want to do that. You know, there's all kinds of ways in which you can also bring your own qualities and your own drive into being a barrister. I basically care about the welfare of children, which is why I'm a children barrister, right? Just makes sense. In terms of bar course, moving slightly more forward, it doesn't matter where you do it, it's the same. I think there's now a new one called the ICCA, is that right? Yeah. Do that one, sure. I mean, when I was a student, that didn't exist, and they were all private providers, and they were all exactly the same. There was no kind of league table for bar course. There's no kind of right or wrong answer. Choose the one that's nearest to where you live, is what I would say, or choose the one that's cheapest, or choose the one that gives you the most money. I got a scholarship from my bar course provider as well, so don't forget to apply for those if money is an issue. Bear that in mind. I went to BPP, which is on Red Lion Street, about 2 streets up from here, and lived in London when I did mine, and have lived in London ever since. So I don't have a huge amount of, I'm not really being representative here, am I? I'm not very diverse, sorry guys. I don't really have a huge amount of experience of the kind of regional offerings, but to be honest with you, they're all the same. Do it where you can live somewhere cheaply and do the course with pretty short shrift is what I would say. Don't have a huge amount of words of wisdom on that. In terms of degree, a lot of people say, should I do a law degree? Should I do another subject? It makes absolutely no difference in my experience at all, unless you have a real burning passion to do a law degree. I'd treat yourself and do something a bit more fun and then do the GDL. It doesn't really matter. Most of you are still at law school, so that's fine. You've made your decision. But if you're worried that people at the bar care whether you did a law degree or not, they don't. Most of the time, I don't even know of the people I meet whether they did a law degree or a GDL. The only thing I would say is, of course, GDL is another added layer of finance and having to live somewhere else, because again, minimal places actually offer it. So do some research into that, because that's going to be dictative of how you then do the bar course and so on, and probably where you apply for pupillage. So bear those things in mind. In terms of other things that I think you can do at your level, if that's helpful, I think you can all do, well, I think you should all start thinking about what kind of barrister you want to be. And I think you should all start thinking about what that looks like for you and how best you can exploit those skills into proper experience and life experience. So as I said, I went straight from Cambridge University to London private bar course to London pupillage. And I was doing child protection cases that involved very serious injuries to very, very small children from about day 2 of my pupillage. And I found it extremely hard, like really hard. This is a very difficult first job to have, is what I would say. And if I had my time again, I would do it differently. I think I would probably have worked in a local authority or in childcare or in a charity or something like that for a period of time. Firstly, for the money. And secondly, to really get a little bit more life experience. I was 22 when I started pupillage. That's really, really young. That's little to be doing the things that I was doing in my pupillage. Now that's because I do family, which is the best, but it is really, really hard. Even if you're doing tax or you're doing shipping or you're doing chancery, you're going to be coming up against things that are really hard, both emotionally, intellectually, and physically. So I think it's worth giving some thought as to like planning the next 5 years. Do you definitely need to be a barrister at 23? The answer is no, you absolutely don't. It's not a race. Do what is the right thing for you. And whilst, yes, I did do it at 22, as I say, if I had my time again, I wouldn't, because I did find it really hard. And it was overly difficult for me to complete pupillage, more difficult than it should have been, because I was so young and it was my first job and I had no idea what I was doing. And I was really cocky and I just come out of Cambridge. So like, it was a perfect storm of disaster. So think about that as well. You know, if you're interested in housing law, go and work in a law centre. There's 3 in London that you can volunteer at tomorrow. Go and do the free representation unit. If you're interested in immigration, then go down to the Home Office and see what they're doing there. If you want to do crime, go down to the Old Bailey, watch some cases. There's all kinds of things you can do to pad out your CV in a way that is with an eye on the future, with an eye on what kind of barrister you want to be and how you're going to get there. And that would be what I would start thinking about. So I already knew by about my second year that I wanted to do family. So I did a family law dissertation. I did the family law module. I wrote to family lawyers. I went on family mini pupilages. I did family mooting. I worked in a local authority in the summer. I did childcare charity research. I did publishing for a childcare charity. I wrote articles about child law. There's all that kind of stuff. I did that because I wanted to be a child barrister. And so I could go to these interviews and say, here's all the things I've done. I clearly want to be a child barrister. And I went to a lot of, so I basically think pupillage application is a bit of a numbers game. I reckon just shove it all on the wall and see what sticks. It's not everyone's way of doing it. I applied to 31 chambers and got 1. So that might be about me, might not be, but we'll see. But I applied to loads and loads of criminal chambers and loads of civil chambers when I applied for pupillage. And they basically asked me for an interview. I came in and they said, you've done a family dissertation, you've only ever worked in family, you clearly want to do family law. What are you doing here? Fair point, right? Like I'd made it pretty clear what I wanted to do. And it probably would be better if you have a clear idea of what you want to do. And I'm not saying you have to, but if you have an idea of what you want to do, take that and just focus on doing that, because it will be way less exhausting than doing what I did, which is just trying to apply to like 15 sets, all which did things that I didn't really want to do and wasn't particularly interested in. I also think that the inn is a very valuable resource. So if you are members of the inn, there are people in these inns and in the other inns as well that practice what you want to practice. So Lincoln's has chancery barristers coming out of its ears. Like all the benches are chancery barristers. So if you want to be a chancery barrister, come to an inn event and speak to a chancery barrister. It's really, really straightforward. And I think the inn is such a valuable resource in terms of events that they offer. There's people wandering about, just come and have a drink in the bar and you'll probably hear chancery barristers talking about their cases. That kind of thing doesn't happen in many other professions. You can't just kind of walk into a hospital and hear doctors talking about their cases. It doesn't happen like that. So this is a really valuable place to be if you're interested in honing what kind of a barrister you want to be, or kind of seeing what the day-to-day life of a barrister is. Although my day-to-day life doesn't look like this, but we'll park that for another time. Do family. So I do think that it's important for all of you to take a minute and think about where you want to go, what you want to do, what you want your life to look like. There is also, of course, this is obvious, but I want to make it clear, there are mixed civil sets. You don't have to specialize. You can do everything and anything that you want to do. But I think it's a bit harder to convince a panel of barristers who work in those areas that you want to do all of them than it would be to just say, I want to do one of them or two of them. So bear that in mind. And I think these are the kind of questions you should be asking yourself at this stage, because it just makes your life so much easier. Do some planning, do some research. It shouldn't take more than half a day. And you should have a clear idea about where you want to go and what you want to do. So use the resources that are available. There's so much out there in terms of pupillage help, scholarship help, junior barristers talking. Well, any opportunity to talk about the junior bar, we'll take it, because we want people to know what it's like. We don't want to sell you a dud or sell you a dream that you think it's going to be like this and it's actually going to be like that. That's not in our interests. So do your research, speak to people, find out what you want to do and where you want to go. Take some time to plan it, would be my number one piece of advice. And don't rush it. You don't need to be doing this at 21. You don't. You can do it at any age. One of the best pupils that I've ever met did pupillage at 46. It's there for you. The bar's waiting. Come and get it when you're ready, basically. What else should we talk about? I'm just looking at Clara's list. One sec. Okay. Let's talk about being a barrister. Okay. I think that being a barrister is quite different to what people think it is on telly, obviously. It's quite a lot of work. It's also quite a lot of management of your own time. So I'm self-employed. I don't have an employer. I work as part of a chambers, but that's just a collection of self-employed people who will pay money into the chambers to keep the lights on. I don't have an employer or a boss. I don't have to be anywhere at any time except when I'm in court and I'm instructed to attend. So if I'm not in court for a few days, I could be in the Caribbean or I could be in my flat in Islington. And it doesn't matter. No one knows. No one asks where I am. And that's quite difficult if you're someone who's not quite disciplined. And that's not to say that people who are neurodivergent or have difficulties with learning can't be a barrister. That's not the case at all. There's a massive neurodivergency collection of people at the bar. But it means that you have to expect that you have to be managing your own time. No one's going to tell you where you need to be. Even your clerks, they might say, oh, can you do this case at 4? You'll go, yeah, but I'm in Norfolk right now, so let me get in the car. You know, no one knows where you are and no one has any interest in where you are unless you're at court. And that's quite a difficult way to live your life because the time is yours. And if you leave it too late to do something, that's your fault. And that's sometimes quite hard as well. So if you're one of those people who left a dissertation till the night before overnight, that might be the kind of barrister that you're going to be, which is fine. It's the kind of barrister that I am, but it's quite difficult to manage your life like that, right? And sometimes you need to be aware of your own shortcomings in that respect, because it is a very disciplined profession. It needs discipline, it needs organization. So in terms of being self-employed, keep an eye on that. I mean, you can actually, I'm being unfair, you can be an employed barrister, you can work in-house at lots of different places, but the majority of barristers are self-employed. If you have questions about the employed bar, I think there's a section on the website about it anyway. So, but don't ask me because I'm not an employed barrister. As a self-employed barrister, in terms of day to day, I probably am in court now. If I'm not in a trial, I'll be in court 4 times a week, maybe 4 cases a week. That involves writing position statements, which is a little note that we give to the judge about what we want from the court 4 times a week. It involves drafting orders 4 times a week. It involves doing attendance notes 4 times a week. It involves traveling to Ipswich, Chelmsford, Guildford, Croydon, Brighton, Horsham, Crawley 4 times a week. And it involves meeting new clients and taking on new papers 4 times a week. So it's quite a lot of work. I don't think children law is that hard. That's why I did it. But other stuff is quite hard. So if you're someone who doesn't digest information quickly, that can also be a bit of an issue. It's manageable. You just do less cases in the week. But bear in mind that there will be an expectation potentially that is what's going to be asked of you. I think the most important quality for a barrister is being able to find out the most important thing on the page when you're reading it. So I get in care work, you get a lot, like big bundles, like lots and lots of information, and you get them really late. That's just how the public bar functions. So I might get like a 1,500 page bundle at 4 p.m. for a hearing at 10 a.m. the next day. I'm not going to read 1,500 pages. I physically can't. And also I have to eat and sleep and do all the other things that involve being a human being. So what I need to be able to do is go through that bundle and find the most important pieces of information and the bits that I know the judge is going to ask me about so that I can answer those questions. I'm not going to pretend I've read everything. And if I'm asked, I'll say I haven't. But I need to be able to tell the judge what they need to hear from me, what's missing, what the court needs to do better, what I'm asking the court to do and why I'm asking the court to do it. And I need to understand all of that in about the 6 hours that I have before I go to bed. That's quite a difficult thing to do. You get used to it. I think you do it a lot at university when you're writing essays and things like that. But it's quite a hard thing to do. And it doesn't get easier because once that's done and I'm on the train back from that hearing, I've got to do the same thing again for the hearing the next day. I love that. And it's a huge part of why I became a barrister. But it's a really quite tricky thing to manage. And we're all going to mess up. I was a terrible, terrible first year tenant. I had just no management of my own time and I was late on my documents all the time. And it was really, really stressful. But being like that was more stressful than actually being a bit more disciplined and realizing that I needed to take some time and manage my practice effectively. And that involves having boundaries with your clerks and with your colleagues and with judges and with other people and saying, I'm not doing this now. I don't have the time. And that's quite a big thing for barristers to say. But we're becoming much better at establishing boundaries at the bar, I think. When I first joined, it was very different. So I think that's quite an important part of what it is to be a barrister. As I say, if you're a bit more like my friend who's at Radcliffe, you might do that kind of thing, but you'll have to write an opinion by the next day, or you'll have to generate a document, or you'll have to generate basically what you think the answer to the case is, having read the papers. And that's quite difficult too. I always think about, I think a good kind of analogy of barristers versus solicitors is that, and this is not an insult to solicitors or to GPs, my mum is one, but if you think about the NHS, you have every person with a problem goes to a GP first, right? And then the GP says, okay, you've got a problem with your foot, so you're going to the foot specialist. You've got a problem with your heart, so you're going to the cardiovascular guy. You've got a problem with your lungs, you're going to the lung guy. We're the guys, the GPs are the solicitors, right? So that's kind of how it works. The punter walks in the door and says, I've got a problem, I want to get my kid back off my partner or whatever. And the solicitor goes, right, okay, here's what you do, does all the preparatory stuff, and then it gets in court, they ring me, and I have to then look at all of that and come up with the answer, right? That's kind of how it works. That's a bit of a blur of it, but that's basically how I view it. And I think that's quite a helpful way of looking at it, because you will be expected to be an expert. And while you are learning and working and collaborating with other lawyers, majority of the time at the junior bar, you're on your own, unless you're being led. Even then, you're probably on your own. Silks are lazy. But if you're on your own, there's no one to ask the answer of. People are asking you the answer, And you have to be confident in that and be aware of what that means and what the boundaries are of what your own knowledge and limitations are. And that's quite a hard thing to do as well. I think one of the reasons that I found pupillage really hard, this is like a therapy session, sorry guys. One of the reasons I found pupillage really hard was because I thought I knew everything and I had a huge amount of confidence in my answer. I was like, oh, I've read the Children Act like twice. I could do this in my sleep. And I didn't know everything and I wasn't listening when people told me that I was wrong. And I think massively being insightful, being reflective, understanding, listening and growing are the most important things you do at the bar. You are learning all the time. You are never going to be the best barrister in the world. Okay. You're just not. None of you are. And why would you want to be, right? Like that would be weird. But I think understanding the limits of your own ability and asking for help is really, really important because you are on your own a lot of the time and you're at court on your own and you're traveling on your own and you're not seeing anyone that you like for like days on end if you're working really hard. And that's hard. And so being able to understand that you're not going to know everything and that you're not going to get there on your own, I think is really important as well. I do love working on my own. I'm not particularly good at authority or being told what I can and can't do and when, but I understand that I can't do this job on my own, and it takes an army to kind of support the ability that I have to do my job, and that includes my family, my friends, my colleagues, my clerks, judges, opponents, everyone. We're all kind of in this together, and it's important that that's your attitude, I think, but what the hell do I know, right? So who cares? What else? How pupillage can be obtained? Well, if I knew that. Any experience in transition? Okay, we'll talk about pupillage for a bit. How long have I got? Oh, not very long. Pupillage is hard. It's like 1 in 10. It's really, really hard. I have a podcast that does a pupillage application special. Listen to that. It's way easier than listening to me. I'll get Clara to send you the link. But it's really hard. You need to know your stuff. You need to be expected to be grilled. You need to be committed. You need to be analytical. You need to be switched on. And you need to accept that you're not going to win them all. No one needs more than one pupillage offer. So striving for 9 is pointless. You're never probably going to get the set that you think that you want, but the set that you get will be the one that you should want, would be my advice. It's a bit like one chooses the wizard kind of thing. Have you guys read Harry Potter? Probably not. Embarrassing. So I think, you might want to be at Doughty Street being Amal Clooney. I'm sure you all do, but only some of you are going to be, and that's okay. And some of you are going to find sets that you don't even know exist right now that are the perfect fit for you. Don't give yourself too hard of a time. Apply to the ones that you think are beneath you, apply to the ones that you think are above you, and see how you get on. I think it is a numbers game. I think give it a shot, see how you get on. You're probably going to have to apply more than once. That's fine. There's no shame in that. Almost every single barrister at the bar has done that, apart from me. So I think don't be ashamed, or don't trick yourself into thinking that it needs to be a certain way. It doesn't. Do it the way that suits you, and do it in a way and a pace that is your own. Don't let this job become your life. It is not your life. It is a job. And if you don't do it, you'll be fine and very successful. Okay. Is that hard now?
Yep, it is. Thank you very much. So I'm sure.
Don't clap.
So I'm sure you have some questions for